นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. If you keep up a daily meditation practice, even if it's a brief one, only 10 minutes, it's such a useful thing, such a beneficial thing to do, as it's a chance to check in with yourself, get to know yourself better. And so much of our life, our mind, which is the kind of driving force of everything, is going out to the world through our senses, going out to sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, or just endlessly thinking, remembering, imagining. And we very easily prey to our moods and reactions. And this is where suffering arises in our experience. We seek out things that we like through our senses, and we try to get rid of things we don't like. Much of the time we're doing that without realizing. It's so automatic, it's unconscious, it's happening whether we realize it or not. But as soon as you start cultivating the qualities that the Buddha encouraged us to develop in meditation, such as mindfulness, clear comprehension, and the reflective power of the mind, you get to know yourself a bit better. So you're checking in what's going on. And, when we talk about our life, we say life, my life is going well, going bad, this, that. It starts with what's going on in your mind, how you feel, how you're thinking, how you're feeling, your attitudes, and so on. Not that what's going on in the world outside is unimportant, but the more important thing is what's going on inside, the world inside. And so much of the time we're missing that. We're not very aware. So at the very least, once or twice a day, if you do some formal meditation, then you've got a chance to check in with yourself. And checking in with yourself, you get to know what mood you're in, how you're doing, how you're coping. And it's just like literally checking in on another person. Sometimes you check in on someone and they're busy or they're stuck in their mood, and you ring them up or you talk to them and they don't want to know. So they're short with you to get you to know that they don't want to talk, they don't want to have a conversation, they don't need you checking on them sometimes. And then other times, then maybe that person is lonely or suffering in some way, and they welcome a bit of interest from another human being. And then we are the same. And even in meditation, if you're totally alone, but just checking in with yourself by becoming more mindful and aware of what's going on, you also find you have the same kind of reactions. And sometimes you feel very relieved and glad that you're taking the time to pay attention to yourself, get to know yourself through the meditation. Then other times the opposite. You don't want to know yourself. You don't want to do it. Especially when you're feeling stressed, angry, depressed, whatever. You don't really want to see or know that state of mind that you're experiencing. So meditation is hard. It's hard to be with yourself sometimes. But one thing we're aiming for is this quality of mindfulness, which brings with it a sense of equanimity, which allows us to observe the way things are. And it's a very positive, skillful quality. So it comes from the right place. When we're mindful, we're not yet creating any suffering out of our experience. Even if we are suffering, we're not adding to it or making it worse. We're just getting to know what's there, what's happening. So mindfulness is very close to the qualities of kindness, compassion. It's very close to the quality of wisdom, understanding, which is also close to kindness and compassion. I mean, they're like different aspects of the same thing. These skillful qualities, what we call kusala dhamma, skillful qualities, they support each other, encourage each other in a good way. So when you take the time to get to know yourself in meditation, even if you are feeling lousy or tired or stressed, or if you're feeling good, you're just bringing up these skillful qualities together to get to know yourself better. And out of that, many good things arise. You become more knowledgeable about yourself. But the idea of practicing mindfulness is you're keeping your mind in the middle towards experience, a place of equanimity, knowing experience, and developing that as a strength of mind, power, a strength, through practice, through repeated practice. Because in order to know stress and suffering and where it comes from and how to end it, you have to develop some strength of mind, the ability to look and observe yourself. To turn your attention around from going out to the world to coming inwards to your body and mind in the present moment. And to do that, we need to practice meditation, mindfulness, a lot, as much as possible. But anything is better than nothing. Of course, sometimes we fail. So you begin meditating and you feel miserable from whatever's been happening previously in your day, in your life, and you've been thinking about things that are agitating you, worrying you, getting you angry, or whatever, or maybe you have some physical ailment, you have pain or physical tiredness. And that comes up very strongly, and maybe your mindfulness in the beginning of the meditation is not very strong yet, because you've just begun. So the hardest part of meditation usually is the beginning, getting to do it, to begin it, and then sticking with whatever you encounter as you turn your attention inwards. Is not always good, what you see. We're not always peaceful, we're not always in a very healthy or skillful mood. You probably know the hardest time to meditate is just after you've had some stressful experience, like an argument or some kind of accident or something, or some kind of unpleasant encounter with a person or an animal, or just remembering something unpleasant. It's very hard to settle down or to bring up mindfulness because your mind is so stirred up. If you're really stirred up, your body is stirred up too, isn't it? You get adrenaline, you get various chemicals and different physiological reactions happening when you have strong emotions. It's hard to be mindful. It's hard to go to something like the breath, to the breathing in the beginning. You might say your mind is not yet ready for it, unless you've already previously done a lot of practice. If you're less experienced with practice, then it can be quite challenging sometimes. Nevertheless, that's useful. We need to do that, and even to encounter sometimes the mind that is totally unpeaceful, not focused, not in a very good state, because you need to know that that's how you are at that time. Even that knowledge is beneficial to you. It can help you. You know, oh, I'm stressed. Because sometimes you're so stressed, you don't know you're stressed. Which is not a very safe state to be in, because the more stressed we are and the less we realize that, the more likely that we do things that are not so skillful. Maybe we make our stress worse, or we take it out on other people, or we make mistakes and do things that are counterproductive or downright hurtful to ourselves or others. So it's not necessarily wrong to sit down and try and meditate and know that your mind is all over the place through anxiety or agitation or anger or worry. That's okay. But as you practice more and more, even if it's only brief periods once a day, you get to know, well, even if your mind is caught into a very negative state, it's not the end of the world, even though that state of mind may be physically or mentally quite disturbing. If you practice regularly, very quickly you come to know the simple truth that those states of mind are impermanent. They come and go. However big and powerful and overwhelming they seem, they do pass. And if you've seen that once, you can see it again. So even when you're feeling stressed, when you come to meditate, you gain something from that experience. If you're willing to have a look at your own mind and your own experience in that moment, you gain some patience, but you gain understanding as well, which you can build on through regular practice. Where does all this stuff come from? Where does all the pain of the body, where does all the pain of the mind, the agitation come from? Well, the Buddhist explanation is karma. Every day we make karma following intentions, thoughts. Intentional action begins as a thought and then comes out speech as action. Good intentions, bad intentions, and they leave their trace, sometimes very subtle traces in the mind, sometimes very obvious, powerful traces, and of course leads on to action as well, not just thought, but leads into action. But it leaves its impressions with us. And they keep coming back to us over and over again. So when you sit down to meditate, that's what you're encountering, your past karma. Maybe the past karma of 2 minutes ago, or it may be many years ago, so far back in your personal history, you can't even remember the initial cause or the origin. But things come up, don't they? And they come up and disturb the mind. And this is why we practice meditation, and the best way is to practice regularly, because you develop the kind of qualities to help you meet with your old karma as it arises. On the deepest sense, the Buddha said, that karma is it's not a personal thing. There's not even though you can say, well, I made my karma and I'm experiencing the fruits of my karma right now, different memories, feelings, thoughts coming up. It's not like some person or superior being kind of controlling us, making these things happen. the causes are already set in place from the past. You can say, well, that was me in the past, last week or 5 minutes ago or whatever. But really, those sets of causes and conditions that we're now experiencing as we begin meditation are impersonal. They've been set in place, set in motion by previous acts of karma, mental acts, verbal acts, physical acts. Now they're coming up as the resultant karma, what we call vibhaka karma. And on the deepest level, you can say there's no one to blame for that. It's just the way it is. You've thought these thoughts before, you've done things before, that they leave impressions on your mind. And when the causes, conditions are right, the triggers are right, they come up. And we don't even realize it most of the time. But as soon as you begin meditation, you do start to see things, don't you? You know things. Oh, I'm in a bad mood. I'm happy. I'm sad. I'm good. I'm bad. I'm peaceful. I'm not. That's all the karma coming up. As you meditate, this is new karma, good karma, putting effort into bringing up mindfulness, awareness, and maybe reflecting on what's going on and consciously cultivating skillful qualities to deal with whatever you encounter as you meditate. This is all very good karma, new karma. But you also have to accept the old stuff. No way around it, because it's happened, and that's just the law of nature. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're male, female, young, old, Buddhist, not Buddhist, whatever country or part of the world you're living in, or even if you got into a rocket and went into outer space. It's just the way it is, isn't it? Karma is just a law of nature, cause and effect. And as you meditate, you're studying that. This is what we call the sankhara khandha, the kind of active part of the mind. What is the mind? It's this quality that knows. We sometimes call it consciousness, mind, citta. The Buddha himself had a number of different words he used, but it's this quality that knows. So as you bring attention to a meditation object such as the breath, you're knowing the mind, looking at it more closely, and you'll experience feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings, memories, and then thoughts. And some of it is very quick, so you in 1 second a thought that can arise, and another thought and another thought. Because the nature of the mind is it's arising and ceasing all the time, moment to moment, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not. You have to take that as a theory, first of all. If your mindfulness is not constant enough to see that, you just take it as an assumption first. You've read it, you've heard that, heard people like me, or you read the suttas, or you've heard other teachers say, well, the mind is something that arises and ceases. This quality of knowing arises and ceases from moment to moment. And you may have an inkling of it because occasionally it's obvious when your thoughts are just popping up and you're watching that. But much of the time, the arising and ceasing catches us out. And your mind jumps from object to object, so you miss it because you're constantly attaching to each new object, getting lost in it, getting lost because of craving, desire. Literally, we say delighting in every object, even the unpleasant ones we delight in the sense we attach to them and identify with them. And we don't see the separate moments of consciousness because it's so fast. But nevertheless, if you practice mindfulness regularly, you start to notice that, don't you? You notice the changing thoughts, moods, images, feelings. You do become a little bit more aware of all that. And so it's perhaps for you, like for me, it starts to make sense. You say, oh yeah, this mind is so quick to change. Our mood can change just in the course of 15 minutes of meditation. You can move through a number of different mental experiences, can't you? One moment frustrated, next moment feeling more content, next moment confused or worried or doubting. Yeah. In a short period of time of practicing mindfulness, you'll notice some of this arising and ceasing of the mind. And similarly, physical experiences we have, sensations, pain around the body, you'll notice. The more you practice, the more you'll notice that. So it starts to make sense. The impermanent nature of body and mind becomes more clear. But in the moment, in the beginning of meditation, it's very frustrating, because it's, as you see the mind moving from object to object, like following a monkey or watching a monkey, or maybe initially kind of fascinating, but after a while it's quite tiring, isn't it? Following somebody or something that just moves around, jumps around from branch to branch in a tree, or just moves from thought to thought, object to object, it's quite tiring. But even that sense of watching the mind and seeing it, how it becomes tired, or becoming tired watching it, that's giving you a little bit of insight. The nature of the mind, how it discontented is, how dissatisfied it is. And it's teaching you something. Even if you feel totally bored with your mind that moves from object to object, that's teaching you something, isn't it? And there's the boredom of the world, when you have that thought, oh, what shall I do next? What shall I do now? I'm bored. Maybe you're bored listening to this talk or meditating, or you're bored in some situation. You do something you thought would be interesting, absorbing, and it turns out to be boring. That's the boredom of the world, and the mind is not in a good state. It's not at peace. But the boredom of Dhamma that comes through practice is a little different. It's boredom that leads to detachment, leads to weariness. The proper word the Buddha uses is nibbida, where you realize how fickle the mind is and how it does just jump from object to object, and nothing is very satisfying. Nothing lasts. Nothing is permanent. And it actually leads to wisdom, understanding, a deeper understanding of things. So it's different than the ordinary kind of boredom that people have, just not having anything to do. We all know that. This is the boredom that comes from seeing the way things are, even seeing your own suffering. We get bored in the sense it's wearisome, tiring, seeing how the mind is so discontent. It's always looking for something else to do, to think about. But we get bored of that, bored of craving, bored of attachment, bored of the seeking after something new all the time. But in the beginning of practice, that boredom, that turning away, that tiredness perhaps doesn't last very long and can very quickly turn into more frustration, more negativity, which is frustrating again. So frustration often builds on frustration, doesn't it? You put a lot of effort into your meditation, you're starting to see the mind, how it jumps around, so then you let go of things because you realize they're not that important. You can let go of them, so your mind experiences a bit of peace. But then it goes back to jumping around again, picking things up, and that's very frustrating. So you get frustrated, being frustrated. It can be quite an endless sort of circle. And then in the end, you're so frustrated, you say, I give up. Or what often happens if you're meditating is that something comes in that takes over your mind, like pain in the body is probably the most common one, isn't it? You're meditating for a while, putting forth effort, working with your mind, putting up with the frustrations and the discontent. But then it gets so much for you, and the mindfulness is perhaps not steady enough, not continuous enough, that then some pain starts to come up and you give up. It's like, oh, this is too much. So you want to move, you want to get up, stop altogether, perhaps go and do something else so you can forget about this troublesome thing called meditation. But keep working at it. Be patient with that. That's where you get progress in your practice, being patient with the very frustration of meditation. Pain in the body, discontent in the mind not settling down. Just keep patiently watching that and you learn. The time when you get breakthroughs in meditation is often the time when they say you're at the end of your tether, you're at the end of your rope, and you want to stop, you want to give up because it's so frustrating. That's a very strong desire, but if you can stick with it and just say, okay, that's another desire, it's just another thought, often you find very quickly your mind goes quiet, peaceful. The body relaxes, the mind relaxes. Ajahn Chah used to say this mind and body that we attach to and call, a self, identify with as a self. He used to compare it to like a knot of string or rope all knotted together. It's frustrating untangling a knot, isn't it? It's the same in meditation, when I untangle this mind. If you pull too hard, what happens to the knot? It just gets worse, doesn't it? It gets tighter, far from, falling apart and coming loose, which is what you want. The knot gets tighter if you pull it in the wrong way. If you don't pull hard enough, well, you're forever just kind of picking at it and nothing. That doesn't work either for undoing the knot. You have to find a way where you can loosen it enough to get in there, the different strands of the string or the rope, loose enough to start loosening things, but not so loose that you're not doing anything, but not pulling so hard out of frustration that you're just tightening it, making it worse, and you're making that knot impossible to pull apart. That's a skill. Untying a knot is a skill, isn't it? And the same with your mind. Just learning the right kind of effort, when to be patient with the frustrated mind, when to not give in to the desire to stop meditating. It's just like learning to unpick a knot. It takes skill. But if you've done it once, maybe you get better at it and you start to know what the right level of effort is in your meditation. Not to push too hard, not to push so softly that nothing's happening at all and you just fall asleep or go into dullness and apathy, give up, get distracted. These are the kind of life skills you're learning in meditation. And if you meditate every day, well, those are life skills that you're cultivating, developing. Over time, you may see some good results from that. Because as you experience a mind where this knot has been untangled a bit, either completely or at least a bit, it's a good state of mind. There's a state of well-being, like when you untangle a knot. You feel good, don't you? If you've been bothered by a knot, say a knot in your shoelaces or anything you've been using that's tied up in a knot, and then you untangle it, you feel good. Oh, got that sorted. There's a sense of relief, sense of well-being. And if it's the knot of your mind, the knot of mental defilements, negative emotions, greed, anger, delusion, all the sort of things that cause us suffering, if you're undoing those, then the sense of relief is even more profound, deeper than just a bit of string. And maybe you can become a champion knot unpicker. in your meditation, unpicking the mind. How do we do that? Well, probably number one, establishing mindfulness and reflecting on what's going on. And you come back to the present moment, watching thoughts arise and pass away. You realize that, they are just thoughts arising and passing away, however important or however strong the attachment to those thoughts and moods is, they do just arise and pass away. And what was here a few moments ago is now gone. But you can recognize that when you're mindful. Oh yeah, that arose, that passed away. I was thinking of that and then it's gone. And you get used to picking things up, putting them down, watching things arise, watching them pass away. And this boredom of seeing the way things are, seeing things as impermanent, as not self, is that the mind separating back and saying, well, I'm not going to keep picking things up that keep disappearing on me. This is what we call nibbida. It's just detaching from things that cannot bring you satisfaction and happiness, and don't bring you peace when you are attached to them. You're willing to let go. Just knowing it's just ordinary, even if you have old karma bringing up all kinds of stuff, strong emotional reactions, attachments to other people, loves and hates. If you practice this meditation regularly, you get to see your own mind. You say, well, it's just more stuff, is it? More emotional stuff, more thinking coming and going. And the quality of the skillful qualities of the mind that you're developing meditation become more established. The mindfulness, the wisdom, you see, that's your real refuge, what you can depend on. And you can keep returning to these qualities over and over again through practicing meditation and even in daily life, isn't it? We don't just practice mindfulness in meditation. That's when our most intense practice of it is. But we're also, as we go off, say you have been meditating, you get up and you go off, well, you take your mind with you. So you're also watching and learning from what arises and trying to preserve your mindfulness in every posture. To be able to see suffering, in terms of the Four Noble Truths, to see suffering, its cause, and then the way to abandon the causes of suffering. There's no way around it. We need to train the mind to look at itself, to look at the body, to look at the mind. We can't just do it by remembering the Dharma that we've heard, the good Dharma we've heard, but we have to draw in the mind, bring it inwards to know itself. And that's why we do need to practice. That's why we need to be able to put up, even when our karma throws up all kinds of confusion and suffering, we have to be able to look at that and accept that. It's part of the practice. If you live with people who have practiced that well, you get very good examples when they're in stressful situations, personal illness or different situations that bring stress to them, and you see them reflecting, using mindfulness, using reflection to deal with those stressful situations. You realize the mind can really develop to a very high level and not be stressed by things that would normally cause stress. Remember, one monk I knew was a very good practitioner and considered to be a very wise, peaceful monk. He got burnt by boiling water, hot kettle of water, and the hot kettle, and he unwittingly brushed his skin against this hot kettle and burnt his arm. I remember just watching him. Obviously, he pulled his arm away, as you would, but straight away he was just being mindful of the whole experience, turning just to observe the burn, see whether he needed to address the physical symptoms of the burn, but then watching his mind in that situation, not complaining, not fussing, or just knowing what was going on, and then observing or deciding what the correct thing to do, having been burnt badly, was in that situation. Or in other times, like monks who practice very well through their life, then maybe at the end of their life, or at times when they're experiencing more stronger, painful feelings from illness, injury. It's always very inspiring to see that when somebody, you know, they're very weak or in pain, in perhaps extreme pain, but they're just keeping their mindfulness together, not complaining, obviously not stressed, and just knowing the experience because they have no choice, but they have enough training to do that. It's always very inspiring. One of Luang Por Chah's teachers was, or not teachers, but friends, similar age, Luang Por Sangwan, who used to visit Luang Por Chah from time to time. He was considered a very wise, peaceful monk, called an arahant. The last time I went to see him in his own monastery, which is a long way from Ajahn Chah's monastery, he already was suffering from a collapsed spine. Luang Por Sangwan couldn't sit, couldn't walk. He could only go into a wheelchair if he was moving around. And normally he'd just lie on his bed because he had lots of pain in his back. He's in severe pain. I went to see him, and the first thing he did was get his assistant monks to get him to sit up, and he used a sling, put his arms and head and shoulders through a sling so he could sit up to have a conversation using a sling. So he's probably in great pain, but he wanted to talk because I knew him. He chatted about the Dharma, just talking about different aspects of meditation, Dharma practice, and I translated a bit for some of the other people in the room, until he was so weak and tired he had to lie down again. But we had a nice Dhamma conversation before that point. But not once in the whole, we were with him for maybe an hour, not once in that whole period did he display any kind of stress in his facial features or in the way he was. Very serene, very calm, didn't complain. He just met us, talked to us, and then he went back into his resting posture, lying down on his bed. I've been very lucky over the years. Many different practitioners, both monastics and lay people, have displayed that kind of mindfulness, patience, effort in their practice. That they're in stressful situations, but they don't react with the normal kind of stressful behavior of human beings. And just being calm, equanimous, mindful towards whatever's coming up. And you don't know what's coming up in someone else's mind, but usually you get a sense of it from their face and the way they talk, the way they are. And the more you practice, the more you can do that for yourself. You get to know what level of stress you're under, or, how peaceful you are, how stressed you are. Even if you're a fairly new meditator, you start getting to know that fact. The Buddhist teachings are helping us cultivate the causes and conditions to get beyond stress through cultivating the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, giving us the means. But we also have to take some time to apply that in our life, in our practice. So even though as we practice, stress comes up, the most important thing is more how we deal with it, how we face it, and what we're using to deal with the stresses of life, whether we're using the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, or we're just gritting our teeth, but not really learning from our stress and suffering, but just sort of putting up with it, which sometimes you have to do. But more importantly is to learn, isn't it? Learn, where is this stress coming from? What can I do about it? And that's where we need the mindfulness. In mindfulness, if it's true mindfulness, you're just knowing. Even pain, you're just knowing. Pleasure, you're knowing. A very peaceful, happy mood, you're knowing. And a very unpleasant, unhappy mood, you're knowing that too. Knowing with a sense of separation, detachment, just knowing, oh, it's like this. And as you meditate more, you'll notice, you have those times when you think of something that brings you pleasure, happiness, maybe some humor. Other times you think of something that brings you a lot of displeasure. When you think of times in the past where you've been suffering or when somebody's hurt you or whatever. But your aim is to keep the mindfulness, isn't it? To know what's coming up in your mind and to know it from moment to moment, to know a mood, as a thought as a thought, of emotional experience as just that, just an emotion. That's your aim, to have enough mindfulness to be able to do that. You notice when the more mindful you are, the more liberating it is on the mind. Even the very unpleasant stuff, the body pains when you're ill or tired, the mental anguish of things like when people don't like us, don't treat us very well, whatever. As you practice more mindfulness, you get stronger at just knowing these things as just what they are. They're just conditions of mind, sankharas. They arise, they've had their causes, so they've come up. Sometimes things come up out of the blue, don't they? Like, these are what we call anusaya kilesas. Anusaya kilesas are like mental defilements that are asleep in the train of consciousness. Nothing on the outside is triggering them. Nobody's bothering you. Nothing good or bad is happening. You're in a very kind of neutral, normal state, and then yet your mind still throws them up. Suddenly you're thinking of something that puts you on fire, anguish, despair, lust, desire. Where did it come from? Well, it's past karma, but it's just popped up. And we call this anusaya, just asleep in your consciousness, and then suddenly rears its head up, like when you walk along a path in the forest on a sunny day and suddenly a snake that was just resting there suddenly shoots up in front of you. You didn't see it, and suddenly it's there. We have that in our mind because the mind carries things. These impressions we made, we've had greed and lust before, we've had anger before, we've had envy and jealousy before, fear and worry before. It's all happened before and it left its impression. So sometimes you're just settling down into a very peaceful state of meditation and something comes up right out of the blue. And where did that come from? You can't pin it on anyone, you can't blame anyone. It's just stored up in your own consciousness and rears its head up. And it can completely throw you. If you're not careful, you are just getting into deep samadhi and straight away you want to stop meditating if it's really that strong. Karma is like that. It comes up more often probably as just niggling, habitual karma, thoughts you've thought 1,000 times before, feelings you've experienced many times before, comes up again and again. And sometimes you deal with it with mindfulness, sometimes your mindfulness is weak, so it wins, overcomes you. Sometimes it's some very unusual, powerful emotional states, extreme pain, fear, worry, lust. There's no obvious cause for it. You just have to assume it's some kind of karma from the past. It pops up, fills your mind. If it's really strong, it makes you shake, doesn't it? Strong fear, strong anger, strong lust, it makes you physically shake as you meditate. Maybe to establish mindfulness takes a few minutes or a long time of effort. And then the body goes quiet, the mind goes quiet, you get through it. Other times you give in. that you get so shaky you just can't sit there anymore. So you have to get up and move around, perhaps. But ideally, you sit through it until you've pacified your own mind, and then you can see it. It's impermanent. When you see it's impermanent, then this boredom sets in. Boredom in the sense you don't really give it much value after that. It's like, oh, it's just another emotion, another thought, another desire, another attachment. It's just that. Nothing very special, nothing very big. This is the nibbida, turning away. Oh, don't need to grasp onto that anymore. So it's like your mind goes to a slightly higher level. Maybe just like one step up, one small step up. It's able to look down on itself and say, oh, that was another attachment. Better to let that go. All the teachers we have faith in, in the modern era, obviously there's the Buddha and all his disciples in the time of the Buddha that we still know about, and very fortunate to know about. But also in this day and age, like Ajahn Chah, Luang Por Sangwan, all these different teachers, sometimes I talk about them. They are no different than us. They have a body and mind the same as us. But why did they become enlightened? Basically because they didn't give up. They just kept practicing through all this stuff, their own karma. Cultivating the good, abandoning the bad. Cultivating the wholesome, abandoning the unwholesome. And they simply did it until they had abandoned all the unwholesome and cultivated the path, the factors of the path till completion. They didn't stop and they didn't give up. So maybe I'll leave you with those thoughts tonight. And after this, there may be time for some Q&A.
Handamayang Dhamma Kataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami